What's going on, guys? This is the Edge DFS. This is the quick slant version of the Showdown. Sunday Night Football, Steelers versus Bills. 15 minutes or less. We're going to try to get this all in. If you guys want to check out the full breakdown, over an hour of detailed information on this matchup, check out the link in the end card or check out the link right here. My name is Tyson Smith, joined by Ellie Hernandez. Ellie, what's up, man? What are your thoughts on this matchup? We've got the Steelers at the Bills. Steelers are 11-1. They came off of a tough loss against the Washington football team. The Bills are kind of on a roll right now. They're trending up. What do you think about this game? How do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, I'm excited, man. I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive than some of the primetime games that we have. And I think it's going to be a pretty decent one overall. So regardless of what happens from a DFS perspective, I'll still be pretty engaged in this game.
Yeah, I totally hear you. So just quickly, we're going to look at the Vegas lines here. You've got a 48.5 over-under, a little bit lower than we're typically used to seeing. We're used to seeing a little bit over 50 points this year. The Bills are actually favored. They're minus 131 favorites, and they're -2 in the spread department. The Bills are 9-3. Pittsburgh's 11-1. This is an interesting matchup here. Pittsburgh had a rough few games. They lost last week to the Washington football team. The week before, they had a rough time putting away the devastated, Baltimore Ravens with RG3 and Trace McSorley. So, where do we go here with this game? I think it's going to be a heavy passing attack, as we talked about. We broke this down just a couple minutes ago for over an hour, so we're pretty deep into this matchup here. In my opinion, I think it's going to be heavily passing game on both sides of the ball, mostly the Steelers. The running backs are not as ideal in this matchup. So, Ellie, overall, talk about the matchup in general from a football side of things, and then tell me what you think about DFS side of things.
Yeah, I think it's going to make for an interesting matchup. The Buffalo defense hasn't been as good as we've seen it like it was last year, right? So I think it's going to open up some more opportunities for kind of a very aggressive, or I'm not even sure that's the right word, just a very almost one-dimensional Pittsburgh Steelers offense. We're going to see Big Ben throw 45 plus times, and I think this defense is going to kind of give him an opportunity to do so. So I think it's going to open up some interesting DFS plays. But just from an overall game perspective, the Steelers haven't really had to play anybody too tough this season. So as we get later in the year, I think a lot of eyes are going to be watching this game in the AFC to see if the Ravens truly did expose some of those holes that we see on the Steelers side of the ball. So like I said, I'm going to be excited to watch this one, even though I usually am not a fan of Steelers games. But it's going to be a fun one for both football and DFS.
All right, so let's move over to the quarterbacks real quick. Let's just talk about pricing here. Josh Allen at 12.2K and Big Ben at 10.8K. I think you have to consider playing Josh Allen in every single lineup. That's just how I'm going to handle it. Big Ben, I'm going to have him in a lot of lineups. I'm going to be over the field with Big Ben. I'm just going to leave him out of a few lineups sprinkled here and there. What are your thoughts on this? Having both guys in the same lineup is probably pretty safe here, considering I think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring than Vegas thinks it's going to be.
Yeah, man, I'm right there with you. I think it's going to be a little bit more high scoring than what we're expecting. But I agree. I think Josh Allen's got to be in pretty much all your lineups. I think you got to have as much exposure as you possibly can to Big Ben as well. The only thing that you can really hope for is that he has a couple turnovers, but still can get the volume out to some of these pass catchers if you're fading him. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be tough just because of if you watch the other show, you saw we did some lineup building with some of these other guys, and keeping all these players in is a little bit expensive. Yeah. But again, I think there's some value at the wide receiver position that'll give us the flexibility to do what we need to. But I'm all in on having as much of both of these quarterbacks as I can possibly get.
So if you guys want to check out our Fade of the Night, our Crown the Wrath segment where we go into the captains, our favorite captain choices, as well as our lineup builds, check out that other full-length video. We'll actually bookmark all of those so you can scrub through. You don't have to watch the whole thing if you don't have time. I highly suggest you do. But yeah, check that out. All right, so let's move over to running backs for both teams here. James Conner's at 8K. Devin Singletary's 5,600. Zach Moss trending down. Had a bad game last week. He fumbled right off the bat and was pretty much benched. He's at 4,800. And Benny Snell's at 1,400. To me, James Conner, he is probable. He's coming off of COVID. Most likely will play. But at 8K and the way this offense is rolling, I just don't like it. Quickly tell me about your favorite plays on the running back side. I think we both agree that this is probably a position generally for the game that you can kind of fade. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to be fading for the most part. I think Benny Snell 1,400 is viable in a couple lineups as a dart throw. And then Devin Singletary at 5,800 isn't terrible either. Again, if I have to throw some of those guys in, I might. But again, there's just some people at the wide receiver side of the ball that are similarly priced, if not cheaper, that I'd rather have exposure to. So
Yeah.
not too high on the running back spot here. And James Conner is interesting at 8K, but again, I just don't know if this is the game for it.
So James Conner is, coming in around 30% owned. If he is in the lower end of the 20% because people are scared off by him because he's coming back from COVID, he hasn't really had a great year overall, and the running backs for the Steelers have not been very impressive, generally speaking. Even when Conner was playing, he wasn't doing great. And at that price tag, it's just tough to fit him in because there's so many good plays on this slate. If his ownership comes in lower, I will definitely be higher. I will be way higher on the field. It just all depends on ownership. So keep an eye on that as the afternoon games wrap up on Sunday. Keep an eye on that ownership. I think Devin Singletary is interesting here. He's at 5,800. He's not the sexiest name in the world, but with Zach Moss potentially not getting as many carries or looks as usual, I think Singletary will be forgot about at 5,800 because he's just not one of those guys that it's a stars and scrubs sort of matchup this week. You're going to go high on the wide receivers. They're all expensive. You're going to get both quarterbacks in there, and you're going to have to go down to a $1,200 guy or a kicker or something like that. And at 5,800, he's going to be forgotten about. So to me, that's and Benny Snell at 1,400 is an option because he's so cheap. We just don't know what James Conner is going to be like. If James Conner comes out and is not doing well, it might be a different story, and we might get some more looks for Benny Snell. Let's move over to wide receivers quickly here. This is going to be the key to unlocking the slate. I don't think that's a controversial statement at all. We got Stephon Diggs at 10K, Deontay Johnson at 9K, Claypool at 8,400, Cole Beasley at 7,600, Juju at 7, and Gabriel Davis at 5K. Now, Stephon Diggs, to me, is a guy that you can lock into every single lineup. He is the guy that can and usually will go off, even if he has a bad game, relatively speaking for him. He still most likely will be in the optimal lineup. Deontay Johnson is getting fucking 37,000 targets. He's the number one targeted wide receiver on this team. Big Ben throws the ball over 45 times, potentially over 50. Those targets have to go somewhere, most likely 10 plus for Deontay Johnson. Chase Claypool is the number 3 or number 4 target behind Ebron. So he at 8,400 is an interesting choice. You got to keep an eye on ownership. Cole Beasley had 1 million receptions last week. 7,600. I think recency bias is going to play in there. Juju Smith-Schuster is a great option in my opinion at 7K. I think his ownership right now is projected around the same as Chase Claypool. I'm obviously going to go with a guy that's $1,400 cheaper, who gets more targets and more time on the field. Gabriel Davis is one of my favorite plays in the slate at 5K. Ellie, tell me about your thoughts on this. We've got James Washington and Isaiah McKenzie as well on the lower end. Who are your favorite plays on the wide receiver side?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stephon Diggs and Deontay Johnson are pretty much going to be a part of my core of people that I'm going to be jamming into as many lineups as I can. But Juju Smith-Schuster at 7,000, I don't know how I'm not going to be able to just lock him. Just he has too much upside. He's getting way too much volume, and we've all seen how explosive that Juju can be. We literally the Steelers moved on from Antonio Brown. I know that there was a lot going on there, but if it wasn't for Juju being there, there's no reason that they would have let AB walk. So. I think he has massive upside, especially at 7K. He shouldn't be priced that low with the amount of targets that he's getting in the first place. So he might be probably one of my overall favorite plays in the slate. I mean, he's $600 less than Cole Beasley. What the
Yeah,
hell? I
exactly.
understand Cole Beasley has some upside just due to the volume he's been getting, but he doesn't have the same playmaking ability that you see out of Juju. So
Yeah.
I like Juju a lot. But again, I think literally every one of these guys from James Washington up is in play. Isaiah McKenzie is a little bit pricey for my taste. Even James Washington's a little bit pricey. Those two guys are really going to be kind of your dart throws if you need to save some money at the position. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to have as many of these wide receivers as I can, especially from the Steelers side of the ball, just to the sheer amount of volume that they're getting.
Yeah.
So I love whatever you can do to jam these guys in, I will support it, as long as it means you're not playing Andre Roberts at captain or some dumbass shit like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said in the other show, I think setting a rule to get minimum of one wide receiver from the Steelers is important. I usually don't set rules on Showdown, or a lot of rules on Showdown, but this will be one of them. Potentially to getting two pass catchers from the Pittsburgh side of the ball. Because if Big Ben really does come out and throw 50 times, those targets have to go somewhere. And they're not going to go to the backfield most likely. They're going to go to 3 or 4 different or 5 different guys when it comes to the wide receivers or the tight end position. So what are your final thoughts on wide receiver wise? We have an extra 30 seconds to talk about this because I think it's very important. Do you like getting 3 wide receivers total from this game, like a Diggs, a Juju, and a Claypool, or a Diggs, Juju, and what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, man, I love it. If you can afford to get 4, do it. I think it's viable. I want Diggs in as many lineups as possible. But I think jamming in Gabriel Davis or Cole Beasley into a couple lineups, and then on the other side, grabbing literally any one of these guys, man. I will get as many of the wide receivers as I possibly can in.
Yeah, agreed. So let's move over to tight end position here. Eric Ebron is my favorite pick. He's basically the third in target share wise. He's the third guy on this team, especially lately. He's basically out targeting the past few weeks Chase Claypool. He has a lower ceiling in my opinion, but at 6,400, a guy that's $2,000 cheaper than Claypool and is getting more targets, and his ownership is going to come in probably maybe 5 to 10% lower for Ebron. I think you're going to need some middle range value here, and by building a non-stars and scrubs lineup, I think you can actually get a lot of leverage. With 30 seconds or less, what do you think about this tight end position? Are you targeting anybody else except for Ebron?
Yeah, I love Eric Ebron. I think he has some viability at the captain spot. And then Dawson Knox is interesting. I don't know if I want to pay it much for him, but I think he's worth taking a dart throw at in a couple lineups, especially if Tyler Kroft is out as expected. There's just not enough people for them to not target him occasionally. So
Yeah.
I definitely think he's viable and just on a very minuscule scale. So I like Eric Ebron a lot, especially at that price. He just gives you a lot of flexibility at some of the other positions.
So kickers and defense here. We've got Chris Boswell potentially injured. He's at 3,800. You got Matthew Wright is his replacement at 3,800. So just keep an eye on the news there. Tyler Bass on the other side of the ball as at 3,600, which is surprising to me because I think he is a better kicker and has more opportunity and can get you a higher ceiling. I don't particularly love kickers on Showdown, but sometimes you're just going to need them. So kickers and defense wise, what do you think about your exposure for both of these? You've got Steelers at 4,200 and Bills at 3,400. I feel like you have to prioritize the pass catchers in this game over the kickers and defense. What do you think?
Yeah, pretty much. If you can't catch or throw, I don't give a shit about you in this game. And what defenses play on defense because they can't do either. So I mean, I know that's a gross understatement, but Jesus, I really don't have much interest on any of these guys other than Tyler Bass, and then I'm going to jam in as many of the wide receivers and tight ends as I possibly can.
When it comes to defense, you're going to have turnovers. You can't just have a low-scoring game with a sack or two and expect for the defense to end up in the optimal, especially when there's options around that price tag that are going to score higher. You know, you're going to have a pick six. You're going to have multiple fumbles. And look, Josh Allen is that kind of guy that can do that. But when it comes to defenses, I'd rather just go more towards the passing side of the ball. So Ellie, how are you handling your lineups? Are you prioritizing 3-3s, 4-2s? The ownership is pretty even. 10 seconds or less. What's your favorite stack? What's your favorite build this week?
Yeah, it's probably gonna be 4-2. With my two being Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, and the rest being a shitload of pass catchers and Big Ben from Pittsburgh. Otherwise, I'm doing 3-3 with, again, all pass catchers.
All right, guys, thanks a lot. We're going to have that full video linked in the end card here. Check us out. Give us a like. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.